Greetings, my name is Crystal Turner, and I would like to take this opportunity to present to all my interpersonal communication project for Human Services 508 with Dr. Rita Smith as my professor. What is interpersonal communication anyway? According to Stewart, interpersonal labels the kind of communication that happens when people involved talk and listen in ways that maximizes the presence of the personal. Throughout this presentation, I will identify the following: my overarching goal that can help enhance and influence my communication abilities. I will discuss enlarging the conversation, my behavioral blend and its positive and negative influence in conversation, my potential roadblocks or barriers from an interpersonal perspective, and identifying the key components that can be used to ultimately help me overcome those barriers, internal and external noise pollution and its effects, and finally, my plan of action to implement my overarching goal to positively affect my interpersonal communication and possibly to encourage others to explore the unfamiliar territory in communication. My overarching goal can be summed up in just a few words: to become a more effective listener and communicator. Not to toot my own horn, but prior to this course, I considered myself an influential individual that listens to the thoughts, concerns, stories, and issues of others with an effective ear. Based on the information being presented by the talker, I respond. Contrary to my thought process or definition of the word, listening has a much more broader scope and can be explored in a more in-depth nature from what has been presented to me in my pastime. By simply becoming a more effective listener and communicator, this can change the altitude of my conversation as a whole while enlarging the conversation in the process. Enlarging the conversation has been viewed from the aspects of allowing others to provide their insight to obtain more ideas, thoughts, or opinions on a particular subject matter. However, after further research, enlarging the conversation means much more than that. It means to expand an approach by identifying the needs of communication while focusing on the resources that can bring forth resolution to those needs. Stewart identified 6 qualities of all communication types, which includes meaning. Communication is the process of collaboratively making meaning, which actually makes up our world today. Choice, by way of communication we consider or follow. By way of culture, which means through ethnicity, gender, age, social class, sexual orientation, and other cultural features affect communication and are affected by it as well. Identities involves negotiating identities or selves. Conversation, which is most influential, just talking itself. Nexting, responding fruitfully to what has happened. Helpful next. These practical applications or principles can serve as resourceful means to enlarging our conversation. In the earlier weeks of this course, I completed 2 assessments which have helped me to identify and understand my personal behavioral blend: Discovery Health Interpersonal Skills Assessment and a Uniquely You Profile. After I completed my Discovery Health Assessment, I obtained a score of 96 out of 100 overall. According to these results, it specified that I am an excellent communicator, and most importantly, I have the ability to put my communication skills into practice in my everyday interactions. Carbonell identifies 4 temperaments to help establish the uniquely you profile to determine your behavioral blend. This profile is laid out in a disc form, which is charted below. Behavioral blend through the uniquely you profile was very beneficial to me. Most people tend to have one or more personality type that is combined to formulate your behavioral blend. The uniquely you profile provides the following. In graph 1, this is expected of me, which is how I think people expect me to behave. And in graph 2, this is me, simply is my normal unmasked behavior. My behavioral blend is identified as follows. In graph 1, again, this is expected of me. I'm a personality type S. Carbonell describes S personality types as stable and shy types, do not like change much, and talking in front of a crowd can be somewhat difficult. In graph 2, this is me. My personality type is CIS. Likes to do things right. I'm impressive to others and stable, not aggressive or pushy at all, and sensitive about others' views of me and my work. Well, as you well know, there are positives and negatives associated with my behavioral blend. The positive aspects are outlined as obedient and loyal, encouraging, good friend to others, caring, kind, and a great listener, and being able to handle most difficult situations. Unfortunately, there is a negative side. My negative aspects are I'm too patient, too kind, where others can take advantage of you. Willingness to carry people's burdens. I get hurt often and become disappointed at times. I think too much when problem solving occurs. And I allow my emotions to sometimes take control of my actions. By evaluating the positive and negatives associated with my behavioral blend, I can now understand how they affect my communication with others. According to Burley Allen, listening can be specified in 3 levels based on behaviors that affect listening efficiency. The author outlined the 3 levels as Level 1, empathetic listening. Listeners refrain from judging the talker and places themselves in the other person's position. Level 2, hearing words but not really listening. People stay at the surface of the communication and do not understand the deeper meaning of what's being said. And number 3, listening in spurts. Tuning in and out, but somewhat aware of others, but mainly paying attention to oneself. Well, as you know, naturally as humans, we all have a tendency to develop roadblocks or barriers that can affect the way in which we communicate interpersonally. My barriers include, but are not limited to, being a rescuer. According to Burley Allen, rescuers are advice givers that take on the other person's issues or circumstances and make it their own problem to solve. I must learn to be a more empathetic listener, which does not require solving the issue or the problem single-handedly. Also, my defensive behaviors. According to Stewart, defensive behavior is defined as that behavior which occurs when an individual perceives threat or anticipates threat in a group. Naturally or based on pure habit, if a phrase or statement is directed to me that could negatively affect me or my family, I would oftentimes become defensive. Similar to wildlife, No matter the danger, most animals will protect their family or their territory at all costs. Noise pollution can interfere with my ability to be an effective listener and or communicator. Internal noise pollution examples are biased listening, which involves forming an opinion about the level and value of what is being said, hearing what you want to hear and not effectively listening to the message being conveyed, pressures brought on by those around me. For example, by wanting to help everyone in my pathway, it can sometimes become rather difficult for me to say no. This has proven to be a very hard balancing act, staying on task with other life requirements. Too much for me to just handle on my own. External noise pollutions include stormy weather, being in an unfamiliar area around unfamiliar people I don't know, people talking or speaking in a monotone voice, too slow, too fast, I just can't keep up. Interpersonal communication has many attributes that can help distinguish its importance in today's society. When we communicate, so often we find ourselves in a whirlwind of words that can affect our identities or the way in which individuals perceive us. Through the guidance of my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, my instructor and this course, I have developed my plan of action that can help me to be successful and reach my overarching goal in communication. Becoming a more effective listener and communicator will require me to address the negatives associated with my behavioral blend. For example, knowing that it's okay to say no to others. They will most oftentimes still like me. Ultimately, worrying about being likable is a natural concern, according to Hatfield and Walster, and it can directly affect conversation with family, friends, co-workers, and other superiors. I will try my best to implement Peterson's Talk Listener card to help improve direct communications with others. I want to become a more level 1 listener, an empathetic listener. When conflict in a communication arises, I want to understand communication balancing, which includes listening for a while, talk until the other person stops hearing, and listening until the other person calms enough to hear again. I want to avoid the flat brain syndrome. Emotions are high in conversations. Others are the problem complex, as explained by Peterson. I will watch my verbal cues and nonverbal cues that can hinder the advancement of my conversation. My social problems can be traced to interpersonal difficulties, just maybe imposed interactions or interventions to solve social ills, and also depend on effective interpersonal communication, explained by Burgoon, Berger, and Waldron. Let's look at listening as a 7-step process. Hearing, selecting, attending, understanding, evaluating, remembering, and most importantly, responding effectively with feedback. And last, but certainly not least, I will continue to look to God for guidance and strength through His Word. Thanks for viewing my interpersonal communication project for Human Services 508. As always, I would like to leave on a positive note with a positive word from God. James 1:19 and 20 says, "Know this, my beloved brothers, let every person be quick to hear, slow to speak, slow to anger, for the anger of man does not produce the righteousness of God." This concludes my interpersonal communication project. I pray this presentation is a blessing to you as much as it was to me.